Today's reading's from Luke chapter 12. Then someone called from the crowd, "Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me." Jesus replied, "Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that?" Then he said, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." Then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, "What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops." Then he said, "I know. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and other goods, and I'll sit back and say to myself, 'My friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God."
Show of hands, how many have a closet at home that has nothing in it? Totally empty. Closet with zero in it. It's totally empty. Yeah, it's a rhetorical question. Of course you don't. If you have a closet at home, it has stuff in it. Closets are like rooms to us. If we have one, we feel like we have to put things in it. And that usually leads to us overfilling them, which eventually leads to us storing things at our parents' or adding a garage or an outbuilding to our house, or donating things for a rummage sale. This is true. When I was doing the bulk of the writing for this sermon a couple of months ago, it was the week that we were receiving items for the rummage sale. So as I'm sitting in my office and I'm reading and I'm thinking and I'm praying and I'm writing about the topic of accumulation, which is what we're going to talk about this morning, every 15 minutes or so, I would have to stop to go out into the lobby at Max to help someone unload their car full of stuff that used to be used to organize floppy disks. Okay? Every single day, the global economy spends $44 billion on stuff. Okay, that's $1.4 million a second. Now, the U.S. accounts for less than 5% of the world's population, and yet we spend 30%. We account for 30% of that total global spending, which means we own a lot of stuff. More than any population in human history, more than any culture on the planet currently. Why? Why do we own so much stuff? Says every man. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. Why do we own so much stuff? It has to be because on some level we have bought into, accepted as true, the narrative that life somehow consists in more. So this is week 3 of our Lent series, What If Jesus Came? That's the question we're asking. What if Jesus showed up today? Right now, little baby Jesus. We're talking adult, walking, talking, healing Jesus. What if he showed up at your neighborhood, at work, your friend hang out? What if he, hosted a podcast everybody's listening to? How would we respond to him? What would we do? And what I've suggested in this series is we would reject Jesus just like people did 2,000 years ago, and for the same basic reason. His life, his teachings, what he says, and what he does, it is a judgment. It is a judgment against all of the narratives that we tacitly accept that shape our lives. What I want to do for the rest of this series, for the next 3 weeks, is start talking about some of the narratives that we just receive from the world into which we're born, that we really have no choice but to tacitly accept them, and they just shape us over time until we have a confrontation with Jesus. And the first one I want to cover is what I'm going to call the narrative of accumulation. The narrative of accumulation. So in the text that you heard just a minute ago, Jesus is teaching a crowd of people. It's a great sermon. Okay, if you've never read it, you should go read it. It's in Luke 11, so it's a great sermon. He's teaching a crowd of people. He's saying a bunch of really important things. And right in the middle of a sermon, a man interrupts him, raises his hand. He's having a financial dispute with his brother over their father's estate, and he is hoping to get Jesus to weigh in on it. Of course, he wants Jesus to weigh in on it on a way that will specifically benefit him. And that is always how it is, isn't it? We always want Jesus to set somebody else straight. Jesus, will you please tell my brother that he needs to split our father's estate with me? Now, I think it's important. Jesus does not brush him off. He does not treat his concern as unimportant or superficial. And I, for one, take a lot of comfort in that. People showed up to listen to Jesus, and when they showed up, they had stuff on their minds. They had things going on in life, stuff in their marriages, stuff with their kids, stuff with work, stuff in their national politics. All of that stuff weighed on them, and I'm sure they hoped that Jesus would say something that would help them, maybe resolve something that's going on in their life. And the same is true for you and me. I don't want to uncritically put myself in the Jesus seat here, but you all show up to faith, to God, to church with stuff that's just going on in life. Marriage stuff, boyfriend, girlfriend stuff, kids stuff, work stuff, neighborhood stuff, national politics stuff, health stuff. We all come in here with stuff going on in our lives that for whatever reason, that we care about, that's important to us. And it isn't unimportant to Jesus. But here is where you do have to be careful when you come to Jesus. What's important to you is important to him, just maybe not for the same reasons. What's important to the man who interrupts Jesus' sermon is getting a share of his father's estate. His estate is important to Jesus too, just not for the same reason. And so what Jesus does with this man is what Jesus does all the time with people, what he has done with me a million times in my life. I'm sure he's done it with you too. You come to him with something, and what Jesus says is, Mike, let's start there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take what's important to you as a kind of leaping off point in order to elevate the conversation. What you care about is not unimportant, it's just down here. It's just not what I care about. What I care about is up here, and I'm going to try to bring you up here. And if you start caring about the things that I care about, then what you currently care about isn't going to be as important to you. So you notice what Jesus does. First, he says, friend. Okay, this is not adversarial. Jesus is not, he's not looking to put this guy down. I think he understands where this guy's coming from. Friend, who made me a judge? Now, you need to know in their culture, rabbis were. This was common. If you had some kind of dispute that you needed help with, you went to a religious teacher. Okay, so I don't know if that was a formal process, but it's possible that this guy was thinking to himself, no, this is what you do. This is my way of going to kind of small claims court. This is civil court here. Jesus says, who made me a judge? Okay, this is not what I'm here to do, but since you asked, let's have the conversation. And what he does is he warns the guy. And everybody else who's listening, including us, 2,000 years later, reading the story, he warns everybody against what he perceives is driving the man's question in the first place. In the translation you heard, it was the word greed. Another translation, the word is covetousness, but it basically means a desire for more. What Jesus perceives is driving this man to show up to his sermon, to interrupt him right in the middle of him saying brilliant things, to get him to arbitrate this financial dispute, isn't because he needs this inheritance. This isn't an issue of, Jesus, please tell my brother to quit being greedy, because if I don't get a share of our father's estate, I'm going to be homeless and I'm going to starve to death. That's not the issue here. Getting a cut of his father's estate is his opportunity to get more. And that's what he wants. He wants more. Jesus warns him against wanting more. Not necessarily having more, as if having things by definition is wrong or bad, but wanting more. In fact, there's two Greek verbs here that mean, in the English, it comes across as guard against. What the words mean are focus on, isolate it, pick it up, Separate it from all the other concerns and stick it right in front of you and look at it and focus on it and be honest about it. What Jesus says, I need you to be very careful about your desire for more. You care about getting your father's estate. I care about why you want it. You care about getting rich. I care about why you want to be in the first place. That's the warning. Now, if the global community spends $44 trillion a day on stuff, and Americans, though less than 5% of the global population, account for 30% of that spending, that isn't because we need all that stuff. It can't be. It has to be because we want all that stuff. And if we want all that stuff, that would suggest to me that we are probably not carefully guarding against our desire for more, the way that Jesus commands people to in this text. Right? We don't even have to be suggestive. Jesus will go on to give a character sketch. He will tell a parable so that you know exactly what it looks like for someone to not guard against desire for more. And this sketch happens to look eerily similar to us. The parable starts, a rich man had a fertile farm. If ever a sentence could describe contemporary Western culture, that is it. We are rich people. We have more money and more stuff than we know what to do with. I know you all don't feel like you're rich. Rich is one of those like comparative terms. But historically speaking and globally speaking, we are immensely wealthy. We have so much money and so much stuff, we don't know where to put it all. We are rich people with fertile farms. Now, this guy obviously consumes some of what he has. That's what you do with your material resources. I'm sure he ate some of his crops, and he clearly stored some. He had some barns, and he put some away. We spend and consume our material resources, right? You use the money that you have to buy food and clothing and provide a house and cars and to take trips and all the things. No problem. If you are wise and privileged enough to do so, you hopefully are also storing some away for inevitable future expenses. Jesus doesn't seem to take issue with any of that. This guy's he's rich, he's got a fertile farm, he consumes his stuff, and he stores some away. So it's important. He's already wealthy, and he already has everything he needs. Okay, from there, it gets even better. His farm produces even more crops. So he has more than he himself can consume, or that he has space to store. What a wonderful problem to have. What does he do with his excess? His uncritical impulse. What I mean by that is, if he even had the thought to do anything else with it, we don't hear about it. So as far as we know, the first thought, his instinct, his impulse is, I will store more for myself. I will tear down my inadequate barns and I will build bigger ones. And he's unashamed as to the reason why. He comes right out and tells you what his goal is. His goal is to store so much, to accumulate so much to himself, for himself, that someday he'll be able to kick his feet up and not worry about anything. Life will become essentially a carnival cruise. He will not have to do anything he doesn't want to do, and he can just enjoy life. He seems to believe that life is in the abundance of his possessions. And based on the way we all structure our lives, and trust me, I am putting myself in this camp, we would have to agree with him. Regardless of what we say, the way we structure our lives, we are this guy. If the global community spends $44 trillion a day on stuff, and we account for 30% of that global spending, it isn't because we need that stuff, it's because we want it. This guy is not carefully guarding against the desire for more. He's indulging it. It is the narrative that shapes everything about his life. And if we were going to go just on statistics related to average household credit card debt, average household savings accounts, and average household giving, if we were just to use those three metrics, the average American either spends everything they have and then some. Like they spend money they don't even have on themselves to the point where they have no financial margin of any kind. They don't have any barns with anything in them, not for themselves or for anybody else. So they can be of no financial help or use to anyone else because they've spent every dollar that they earn on themselves and even dollars they don't have. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is we spend money on ourselves, things that we need and we want. We have enough margin to put some away and then some. But like this man, our just assumption is, well, we'll just keep saving more. Like you can't save too much. Like the more we have, the better. Like that's just the unspoken assumption. There might be a number that you need, so you're absolutely going to try to save to hit the need number. But it doesn't even occur to you to stop saving when you hit the need number. We're going to save well beyond the need number if we're able, and we'll save as much as we can. I was born into a world that taught me implicitly that life consists in the abundance of my possessions. That what I ought to be looking forward to is a day when I can kick my feet up and not worry about anything. And the way to have that kind of life is to have money and stuff. Jesus directly challenges that narrative. He says life does not consist in the abundance of your possessions. In the parable he tells, God calls the man a fool, which in Jesus' culture, you did not want to get called that. Like that was a bad word. That wasn't just like you're not very bright. It meant you are quite literally living antithetical to what life is. You are anti-God. It's a powerful word. Calls him a fool and says that you will die today, this very night. Right? We think life is in riches. Jesus thinks life is being rich toward God. So those are your counter narratives. Being rich toward God. Now let me clarify. Being rich and being rich toward God are not mutually exclusive things. But to get rich, in most cases, you have to want to. That is what is mutually exclusive. To want to be rich, the desire for more is the thing that is antithetical to what Jesus says is life, being rich toward God. And you can see it in the sketch. So again, it isn't just having more. There are some people who just grow up in this world and it's like, man, it was never my goal to be rich. I just wanted to hit a baseball. And they just happen to pay a lot to hit a baseball. It was never the driving force in their life. And maybe it's not the driving force in your life. But for a lot of people who end up rich, it was the driving force in their life. And for many of us even sitting here today, right? I mean, the statistics are alarming. It's almost always like whatever you have, you just almost always want about 15% more than that. Being rich and being rich toward God are not mutually exclusive. Wanting to be rich, right? This uncritical desire for more is what's mutually exclusive to what Jesus says is real life. And you just look at the guy in this parable, and you tell me if that's real living and if it's the kind of person you want to be. Because remember, what Jesus cares about isn't that you get the riches, it's why you want them. What does it do to you? If Jesus tells you to guard against, to be very careful against your pursuit of more, there's a reason for it. It's not good for you. It does something to you. You might think it's going to produce life, but what Jesus is trying to communicate to everybody is it does not. In fact, it takes it away from you. And you can see it in this guy's life. Rich man with fertile soil, fertile farm. Today we have technology that we can use to manipulate Mother Nature, ironically, often at the detriment of the very soil we depend on. But back then, they didn't have that. So if you had a fertile farm that produced fine crops, there was only one reason for it. It was because God made the soil to work that way, and God sent the sun and the rain and everything. The point is, everything is a gift. Everything in this man's life is a gift that has been given to him. Now, typically when someone gifts you something, you express gratitude for that. This man never thanks God for what he has. It's not coincidental that what launches Jesus into this parable is a dispute about an inheritance. When you think about an inheritance, if you received an inheritance, you would want to use it in a way that honors the person who left it for you, I would think. I mean, the fact that this guy is coming to small claims court with his brother to get Jesus to arbitrate over this financial deal tells me that this was not collegial. This had gotten acrimonious. That you got to take it to court. This guy's willing to sacrifice his relationship with his brother over stuff. I wonder if they had a chance to ask their dad about that, if their dad would say, hey, thanks for honoring me. You think that's why I left it? So that you guys would hate each other over it? Typically, when someone gives you something you're grateful, this guy doesn't say thank you. And usually you want to use it in a way that honors the person who left it. It's ironic that the man in Jesus' parable asks the question, what should I do? That's precisely the question he should have asked to God. God, thank you for all of this excess that you gave me. What would you like me to do with it? How could I honor you with it? That's not the question he's asking. What should I do in his world? That's rhetorical. It really means, what do I want to do? It's kind of like, should I buy the BMW or the Mercedes? He'd already decided to spend it. That was not the issue. Alternatives were already off the table. Now it was just down to like, what am I going to go get myself? And there's a buffet of options. So he's not interested in honoring God with the gift that God gave him. He thinks it's his to do with whatever he wants to do with it. And because he doesn't recognize that it's a gift, because he doesn't acknowledge that it was given to him by someone, and maybe that someone has some thoughts about what you should do with it, he just takes the liberty of doing what he wants to do with it. And no surprise, what he wants to do it is exactly what I want to do with it. Spend it on myself. I want to use what I have to make my life easier and more comfortable. If I'm not honest about that, it will never change. That is my take God out of the picture. What I want to do myself selfishly is use everything I have to make my life easier and more comfortable, which is precisely what this guy thinks he's supposed to do with it. Right? Store it all up, bigger and bigger barns, and one day we'll just be able to relax and do whatever we want, and we won't have any worries, and it'll be great. And then life will be great. The whole thing's a roll of the dice. Guys, I did a funeral here yesterday for a guy that was 55 years old. He got an infection, it attacked his heart, gone, 2 weeks. He's got young adult kids. I know, and I don't For those of you that struggle with like anxiety and you worry about these kinds of things, this is not to amplify or to make that worse, but you understand that every single day when you get up, you are a minute away. I could collapse on this stage right now, right in front of you. I have no control over that. And that is true every second of every single day. So here's somebody who's saying, you know what I'm going to make my whole life about? I'm just going to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate so that someday I'll have so much stored up, then I'll be living. He has no guarantee he's ever going to see that day. And I think that's why Jesus says in the parable, you're going to die today. Today. I think it's to demonstrate that reality. You got no guarantee you're going to see that day. So the whole point, I think, here is you think that life is something that's going to happen someday as opposed to something that's happening right now. And the means to that life is to accumulate things to yourself, for yourself, to make your life easier and more comfortable. All because you refuse to acknowledge that everything you have was given to you as a gift, and therefore the person who gave it to you kind of has a say on what you do with it, or should. What should I do? You want to be that person? That's why these character sketches they're so penetrating. I do not want to be that guy. You want to be someone who's ungrateful, who thinks that everything you have is yours because it's like you went and earned it and it's yours? Look, you might work the job, but it was a gift that you got it in the first place. Someone had to gift you by hiring you. Maybe you started the company, good for you, but someone gifted you the talents and the education and the experience that it took to do that. You dial it all the way back. There is no argument. You did not create yourself. You didn't think yourself into existence. You may have taken advantage of the things that you were given, but it was all gift from the start. And if you do not acknowledge that up front, right, I would rather be grateful than have a sense of entitlement. Like what I have is mine to do with whatever I want. And I would rather go to the person who gave it to me and say, okay, God, you were gracious enough to give it to me in the first place. You probably have some cool ideas of what I'm supposed to do with it. So why don't you tell me and then I'll go do it. I would rather, that to Jesus' life. That's what it looks like to be rich toward God. He will go on to give his disciples a counter narrative. I didn't have it read to you, but it's in the verses that immediately follow. After telling this parable, he will turn to his disciples and he will say, okay, listen, do not worry about what you will eat, drink, or wear. Do not worry. Just ask God, because your loving Father knows what you need, and he never tires of providing for you. The same God who gifted you out of the fertile soil last week is pleased to gift you out of the same fertile soil today. So just ask. And because you have a God that graciously provided for you in the past and promises to graciously provide for your future, you don't have to store up in barns. So don't do it. He says, sell your possessions and go give your money away. That's the counter narrative. The narrative that you and I inherit is the narrative of endless accumulation. You can never save too much for yourself. You can never make your life easier or more comfortable or too comfortable. I think we all have to be honest that we have imbibed uncritically that narrative as true to some degree based on the way that we have shaped our lives. Jesus' counter narrative is a narrative of gratitude. Recognize that your life is a gift and everything you have is a gift. And to be grateful. And if you're going to be grateful, there's someone to thank. It's a narrative of trust that because you were gifted in the first place, that's how the game works. God provides, and that's how it goes. And it doesn't work any other way. So you trust God to provide for your future the way that he provided for your past. And it's a narrative of endless or extravagant giving. It's engaging in purpose in the world. So the different, if you put them side by side, one person is accumulating to himself for himself. Also, someday he can unplug from the world and do whatever he wants. He has no guarantee he's ever going to see that day, but that's what he thinks life is. Jesus' counter narrative is receive what I've given you, understand that it's for a purpose. Yes, it's to provide for you, of course. It's so that you can get the things that you need and some of the things that you want. There's nothing wrong with that. Of course it's for you and for your kids and your grandkids. Of course that's true. But it's for more than that. It transcends what you need and what you want. I'm giving you all of this so that you can participate with me in the world. You can engage today, right now, not someday when your feet are up, but today. You can use what I've given you to go out into the world and to help people. That's real living. It's not accumulating to yourself, for yourself, so life gets easier and more comfortable for you. It's waking up every day and saying, how can I use everything I have to love and bless and care for the people in the world? Those are your counter narratives. To the degree that your life is shaped more by accumulating to yourself, for yourself, to make your life easier and more comfortable and more enjoyable, versus my life is shaped by getting up every day and using everything I have. Everything I have. My skills, my gifts, my talents, my money, my possessions, all of it. That the driving force in my life, what shapes everything, including how much I save and how much I don't save, is how do I use everything I have to care for and bless the world, to take care of people, to help the people that are around me. And that might be my kids and my grandkids, but it also might be my neighbor, or it might be somebody across the globe. Those are the counter narratives. To the degree that your life is shaped more by the narrative of accumulation versus the narrative of gratitude, trust, and extravagant giving, I'm telling you, if Jesus showed up today, you would reject him. You already have. And I'm in that too. And that's part of Lent. Part of Lent is having to face that and be honest about it. Jesus' life and his teachings are so challenging to the narratives that we have tacitly accepted that shape everything about our existence, that if he showed up and he lived and he taught today, you are going to really struggle to give up your story in favor of his. I think you already do. I think I do too. That doesn't mean that we're putting him up on a wooden cross and putting spikes through his hands, but that's part of how we get away with it. Because we're not doing an act of violence to a human being, we don't see it as rejection. But that's precisely what it is. And you stack up all of these rejections end to end, and eventually you are putting somebody on a cross. And that's precisely what happened 2,000 years ago. Jesus' counter-narrative is very clear. Life is found not being rich, but being rich toward God. Not living in a narrative of endless accumulation, but living in a narrative of gratitude and trust and extravagant giving. Real life is found in engaging God's purposes in the world, not in bigger and bigger barns. We're going to finish our service this morning by taking communion together. We do this every week. If you're new here, the sacrament of communion for the church is a sacrament of remembrance. When you come forward in just a minute and you take the bread that represents Jesus' broken body and the juice that represents his shed blood, you are remembering. Your God is so unfailing in love and faithfulness to you. This good and gracious God who has provided you with fertile ground and never tires of providing for you, even out of his own flesh and blood. That is who your God is. It's remembering that so that when this God comes to you and says, I want you to be grateful and I want you to trust me and I want you to express that trust in extravagant giving in the world, you choose to participate in that life. This sacrament is a sacrament of participation. Taking the elements into your system is a way of associating with Christ and saying, I am going to live your narrative. If that's the choice that you want to make this morning, then the invitation is always to come to the table. Jesus would look at you and would say, friend, I'm going to be honest with you. And if you're willing to listen to what I'm telling you, then come join me. Come to the table. Let's eat together. In just a minute, I'll invite you to stand if you're able. During this final worship song, I'll invite you to come forward, starting in the back rows, just down our center aisle here. Our communion tables are on the sides of our stage there. I invite you to take a prepackaged communion cup back to your seat using our side aisles, and then just take that during this last song as you feel that. I'll come up in a minute to close us. I invite you to stand. Let me pray for us. God, we thank you. We thank you so much that you have made us rich beyond measure in so many ways. We recognize that everything we have comes from you, is a gift from you. Forgive us, Father, if we express a lack of gratitude or a lack of trust, if our lives model more a narrative of accumulation than a narrative of extravagant generosity. Thank you for being so generous with us. Give us faith and strength and courage to trust you, to live into that kind of life here, to experience what you say is real living. We want to entrust ourselves to you this morning. Continue to do a good work in us through these elements as we come forward. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Precious blood has left me forgiven, pure like the whitest of snow, powerful to make sin and shame retreat. This covenant is making me whole. So I will rise and lift my head, for by his mercy my life was spared. The highest name has set me free. Because of Jesus, my heart is clean. Purify my heart in your presence. Teach me to discover the joy of holiness that forms as you draw me close. In you what was lost is restored. So I will rise and lift my head, for by his mercy my life was spared. The highest name has set me free. Because of Jesus, my heart is clean. So I will rise and lift my head. By his mercy, my life was spared. The highest name has set me free. Because of Jesus, my heart is clean. Because of Jesus, my heart